You're watching Open Agenda.
Welcome to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. In this week's episode, we're going to recap the County Council meeting from February 18th, as well as talk about the updates on the CIP that are bound to come up with as the budget season for fiscal year 26 comes on board, as well as an update. The state has given out their yield rates for the property tax assessments, which is going to give us an idea not only of what the budgeting for the county could be, but also where the revenue cap would fall. So in the studio with me today to discuss is Dr. Joe Venosa. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mike Goldberg, thanks for coming out, gentlemen.
Pleasure to be here.
So I think that the number one thing we should talk about from the county council meeting was the kennel bill. Now, this was approved 2 weeks earlier and created and understandably so, it was a mistake. It created a lot of angst amongst small business owners, kennel owners in the county. Mike, what was the process? What exactly did they do to rectify the mistake they made?
Well, first, they voted to override the veto that was issued by the county executive, and then they reconsidered the bill and restructured it whereby instead of a 1,000-foot setback of the improvements at a kennel from the property line, it's now only a 500-foot setback. Makes it much more palatable for the kennel owners, and it also provides a reasonable amount of distance so that adjacent landowners are not disturbed by a bunch of barking dogs. It also allowed for special exceptions if there were any new kennels that wanted to come on board, or if an existing kennel wanted to expand their operations, and it brings them closer to the 500 or below the 500-foot setback, then they can apply for a special exception. And if it's not a problem for surrounding landowners, then there's no reason why it would not be approved.
Well, and I think they did one other change with the way they calculate the distance. It was property line to property line, and now it's dwelling to property line. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean,
That's a big difference.
Yeah. So, Joe, I mean, you've seen at times when they spend a lot of time in work sessions and get a lot of information together, and then ultimately there's these unintended consequences. I mean, what do you make of just exactly how the county executive used, this misstep as political fodder?
Well, I mean, I think you've laid it out pretty clearly here. Again, this is a very common aspect of of county governance. You have a bill. It may not necessarily be perfect, and you kind of wait for community feedback engagement, and you wait, ideally, for the other branch of government to have a collaborative approach. But let's understand what happened, and you said this very well at the county council meeting during public comments, Mike. The executive office was fully invested and on board and part of the process, right, during this whole situation. It wasn't until after the fact that it would seem a few people close to the executive complained about it that then she recalibrated. But what was, I think, troubling, and again, this is nothing new, this is the same song and dance, is there was this sort of social media hysteria that was created to, I guess, rile people in the community up, to almost get them to come to the council meeting with sort of the metaphorical, pitchforks and torches.
Yeah.
And from what we've learned, several of the kennel owners were so worried because they were given deliberate misinformation by the county executive that they actually hired a lawyer.
President, members of the council, I'm John Phoebus. I live in Somerset County, but I'm a lawyer who has an office here in Salisbury. I speak here today on behalf of Marissa Petrak and the dog company. I recognize I'm coming from Somerset County, speaking on behalf of a town of Fruitland business who's actually not subject to the Wycomico County zoning code. So we're here in solidarity with the other dog kennel owners here in Wycomico County. We recognize and appreciate the council reconsidering and trying to correct the legislation that was before it today.
Well, two different lawyers.
Two different lawyers, excuse me. So now you have a situation where many of these kennel owners, thanks to the county executive, are probably out of some money and certainly had a lot of stress, as many of them indicated during public comments.
And within the day after the original bill was approved, it became clear that the county council understood that the bill as passed was problematic, and they articulated that they were going to make the necessary changes. The county executive was well aware that they were going to fix the problem, and yet the county executive, in conjunction with a certain tabloid blogger, tried to whip people into a frenzy completely unnecessarily, and this was purely for political purposes because they knew that they had a solution.
Earl Campbell, I'm a resident of Wycomico County, and for those who are not aware, I'm the owner of Eastern Shore Undercover, the blog that he was talking about. I'm here today to address some things that I keep hearing over and over and over again, and I keep hearing the same complaints by members of this council about social media. Over the course of the last year, I've heard members of this council complain about social media probably 2 or 3 dozen times. I told a particular council member maybe a year ago, social media is the best option for getting information out into your constituents. But for whatever reason, some of you haven't accepted the fact that nothing in today's society can measure the exposure that you can get through social media.
Regarding social media, Mr. Campbell just brought that up, it is an essential tool for communicating with the public quickly and transparently. The issue needed immediate attention, and without my efforts to inform the public, many citizens would have been unaware of the serious consequences of this legislation. The engagement and response from the public were critical in ensuring this matter was revisited. I appreciate the council's willingness to reconsider and improve the bill.
As far as social media, I'm sorry, I am off Eastern Shore Undercover because I'm tired of hearing you guys bicker. I don't want to hear it anymore. I just want you to do your jobs.
Well,
Council meeting.
So, but we got a little peek behind the tactics because I think this is going to come back up, especially as we go through this budget season. The political tactics that the county executive is willing to use for a political win. On the social media post that she just had last week on a podcast, she said, "Look, I'm not going to veto this bill before the county council because if she doesn't veto it, they can't reconsider it. It's kind of in limbo for at least another 2 weeks." But then when they put out their press release last Friday stating that, hey, look, we've got this, we have a resolution, there's a pathway to get this right, on Monday, which is a holiday, a county holiday, federal holiday, that's when the veto comes. So this was really just more about political victories, right?
Well, it's empty virtue signaling. I mean, I think that's the essence of it, because it doesn't do anything knowing what we know about what the bill was going to be, altered to. And again, she reneged on an actual promise that she supposedly made on that blogger's podcast.
Let me show you my astonished face on that.
Correct.
But you did not see the pitchforks and the torches come out because the county council, in full transparency, had to do their business right in front of the public.
They did, and it was clear that this was a win-win for everybody with the reconsidered bill developed by the county council. In fact, during the meeting, several of the kennel owners, they got up and left. They knew their problem was solved. They
didn't even stay.
Yeah, they were prepared to yell loudly, but they didn't have to, and they were satisfied.
And I think that's a good point, because if the goal had been to create, again, sort of a media stunt, I think it backfired on the executive and her blogger very badly, because essentially what happened was not only did other kennel owners basically express the fear and frenzy that they got from the executive's misinformation, but ultimately they even said, right, that the use of social media to sort of give inaccurate comments on the issue created more stress.
Well, and then, so the social media didn't help. And not that social media is not a tool. It's a tool.
Oh, it's a tool, all right.
It is.
Yeah.
But I think as people are getting their information, just like we ask them from us, don't take our word for it. Go come watch this for yourself. But then, to me, the weirdest thing was when it came about the next morning through the local media that she's now questioning the legality of what they did. I mean, if at the end of the day the right thing was done, and they had their lawyers there, they were going through the process in a very, they knew how to keep this legal. Why would you then question it, other than you just didn't get the political victory you're looking for?
Because you're flooding the zone, as they say.
Yeah.
This typifies the behavior of the county executive, in my opinion. It's always about getting some kind of a political win rather than working cooperatively with the council to forward legislation that benefits everybody. The benefit wasn't part of the equation. It was just winning and trying to diminish the council.
And yet I don't think it actually was the win that I think she calculated.
agree.
And that was sort of the enjoyable thing to watch,
Well,
is to see how it was altered.
We'll talk about winning, or again losing again, is this veto of the Board of Ethics getting their own independent counsel. Now, and I think this is one thing that a lot of folks don't understand. These legislative bills don't just come up. Like, you're not going to just walk into the county council chambers one day and there's a legislative bill that just came out of nowhere. These things start with work sessions. They go to have public hearings. They have to be advertised for 45 days. There's public input. There's even time to get up with your representatives and let them know how you feel.
It's a process.
It's a process. We've heard from constituents that they've had ethical concerns about the executive branch themselves, which goes to the ethics board, which is represented by the executive's own legal team. The council has simply allowed them to have independent counsel. I mean, Mike, would you want your own independent counsel?
Well, of course. I mean, it's the fox guarding the hen house, unfortunately, and it makes a lot more sense. It's a lot more fair to have an independent counsel who has no loyalty to either the county council or to the county executive. This is the kind of disinterested party that we should have in place. Presently, we do not. That has to be rectified.
I want to share with folks out there one way they can kind of take a peek behind the political maneuverings of the executive's office. So we saw on this ethics commission bill, it passed 7-0. Now the odd thing is, when they were changing the kennel legislation to benefit everybody, we consistently have one Councilman James Wynn, who's at large, who almost always sides on the same side as the county executive. It'll be really interesting when they have to consider this veto override, whether or not he changes his vote and for what purpose.
It's going to be very interesting to see what James Wynn actually does with these particular bills. Yeah.
I mean, I've gotten to know him personally. I find him an engaging guy. I just want people who can think independently. And again, like as we've done, sometimes you got to go up and give the county council a piece of your mind. They most certainly do not make the decisions, not in an ill will, but they don't make the right decisions all the time. Sure. But they're there for us publicly.
We can do it. We can address it publicly, though. That's the difference.
So Mike, you've run across this. You've had legal maneuverings that have seemed like the deck was stacked against you with the executive's office. I mean, how important do you think it is that they have independent representation on the legal side?
Well, it's essential. You have to have an unbiased party, advising the ethics commission. And right now we don't have that. Essentially, what we have with the county attorney, theoretically, the county attorney works for all of the people of Wycomico County, for both the legislative and the executive branches, but in practice, that simply is not the case. The county attorney reports solely to the county executive. Only the county executive can fire the county attorney. So obviously, they're going to be motivated to please the county attorney and other to keep their jobs.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, Joe, I mean, do you think that it would be possible for her to get the votes necessary to negate the veto override that's due in a couple weeks?
I mean, I think she's already lost.
Okay.
I'll be curious to see what James Wynn does or doesn't do, but other than him, I think it's sealed. And the real question becomes is the executive or people in our office, are they going to try to maneuver to make hay out of this issue too? Meaning, can she manipulate local media and bloggers to motivate people? I don't know. I mean, I think it's really hard, I would hope in this day and age, to sort of be so openly against transparency and not get some pushback from the citizens.
But it's a fight that we've seen time and time.
Yeah, it's the same song and dance.
Well, speaking of transparency, in our next segment, I'd like to spend some time talking about the capital improvement plan, the work sessions that the county council's having with the executive's finance department, really just where they stand with that, and really how is that going to translate into the budget season for folks out there who are watching. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. In this segment, we're going to talk about the capital improvement plan, how that process is unfolding, as long as some of the inner workings of what your government is working on right now at the county level. In the studio with us now is Mr. Bob Taylor. Thanks for joining us.
Sure enough.
Mike Goldberg, thanks for sticking around.
Still here.
Mr. Taylor, you were the county council's attorney for several years, right?
Correct.
So you're very familiar with a lot of these inner workings, and I would say a lot of these topics are at times hard to understand, but we want to really just try to level that playing field, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the capital improvement plan does require the county executive to turn the plan in December, which he has, and now the county government, the county council should be working through work sessions with her and her staff to really come up with the most concise plan possible. They've agreed that this plan won't be approved until June when they finish the budget. But you got a chance to watch the work session the other day, and you really weren't very impressed with the progress, right?
Well, yeah, let's back up just a minute. There are two budgets that are adopted each year. There's a capital budget, and then there's a general fund budget, just for your operating expenses, salaries, things like that. The capital budget, of course, is for capital improvements. Now, under the charter, she has to turn in that capital budget in December, and typically in the charter, it has to be adopted by mid-February.
Okay, which is
Now,
about where we're at now.
That's where we are now, but they have postponed that, as they have done in many years, until later because of the fact that the two budgets have to jive. You only have so much money to go around. You can either borrow, or you can tax, or you can take it out of savings. It's got to come from, or grants. It's got to come from somewhere. So this year, we're in a particular mess because we don't know what the state's going to do.
Okay.
On top of everything else. It's a very bizarre budget year to begin with. So what's happening is we're now kind of midway in the process on this CIP.
Yeah.
I don't know why they put it on for a recap at this meeting this week when it doesn't have to be adopted until as late as June. And it doesn't, frankly, make much sense to adopt it before at least the regular budget, the general fund budget, has been turned in. That won't be until April 15.
Well, Mike, you and I, we were at the work session, and the topic came up about the building they've purchased near Mount Herman Road and Route 50. It's intended to have the health department move out there. It's over 30,000 square feet, and they bought it for $3 million. They have rent income that's coming in while the lease is finishing up, but they're trying to figure out how much money to put into it. Were you under the impression that this building was not going to require a lot of renovation, having seen some of the work sessions before?
Well, it was kind of sold to the public as being turnkey, that it was ready to move in. You got to keep in mind, this had been, it's the former Verizon building, I believe. It had been used as an office building. So it's not being retrofitted for a different kind of use, such as a restaurant and a bar. It's still going to be an office building, just a county office building. So when you have an acquisition price of about $3 million, and then they're saying that it's going to cost another $2.75 million in interior tenant improvements, well, that's just way out of whack. I mean, it's essentially doubling.
But Bob, you've made mention to me, your bigger concern is the fact that there is over $100 million on the next 2 years CIP.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. But
which
getting
is a
back
tremendous
to
amount of
the
money.
small building, or this Verizon building for a minute, I mean, I think Pam Olin made some good suggestions. If we're going to do anything with this building, we need to do it while it's vacant.
Okay.
And who knows? I mean, maybe they should have an consulting engineer and architect go in and outline what's needed, and then also address what they want to change and come up with an estimate. And that wouldn't preclude that architect and engineer. That's professional services.
Yeah, they
so
could
they
still
could
do it.
use them for the actual construction.
Yeah.
What it would preclude would be a contracting firm going in and giving an estimate.
I think one of the questions is for the average taxpayers, where did they come up with a $2.75 million number?
Get a consulting architect and engineer firm to go in, look at the way it is.
But doesn't
that
the
need to
public
be-
doesn't the public deserve to know what their tax dollars are being
Well,
invested
my
in?
question is, why, when they bought this building, didn't the council ask those questions?
Okay.
I mean, there's enough blame, if you want to call it that, to go around here.
Well, and, look, and let's keep in mind that we have two other examples. One being the renovation that is breaking ground on the Civic Center right now, and we got to remember that the 3 of the 7 council members did not vote to spend the extra $2 million, but they didn't do that until the county didn't come back and ask for more money until they knew what they needed the money for. And so that we have that obligation out there right now. I mean, we're spending $2 million that was not funded, it was not budgeted for, along with the library at the Ward Museum. So are we going away from good conservative values where we're starting to maybe throw our money around like there's just an endless supply of it?
I don't know, but I think it's also worth pointing out, getting back to the Verizon building, that they did have a work session in mid-January on the health department items in the CIP,
Okay.
which include this building. None of this came up then.
Because it wasn't itemized.
It was right in the CIP that was turned in.
But it's pretty
been-
much a lump sum number. Look,
Yeah.
when they acquired that building,
But I
you
mean,
know
that-
what?
the time to bring it up was in January.
Well,
No doubt.
I'm not saying there, but at the same time, whether they have to ask the question later or early, I still wanted to ask.
Well,
right?
now's the time to ask the question because they know, roughly how many people, how many employees that the building will have to accommodate. They have to have some kind of an idea what they're doing. They're not moving an unknown number of people into this building for an unknown use.
So the point is, we don't have $2.75 million burning a hole in our pocket, and we're hoping just to spend it the best way we can in this one building. I want to go to one other example. Is we just purchased a new building on Market Street for the Child Advocacy Center. It's a 2-story building, and they've moved into the first floor while they're doing the renovations to the second floor. A 30-some thousand square foot building for the health department that is squeezed together into the Hurdle building downtown now. It does not mean that we need. I mean, bonding is 20 years. It does not mean we need to allocate funds that could go to a lot of other things. And I want to go back to Bob's point. Bob, you've told me you're really concerned about the overall amount of
that's why
in the CIP
it
for the next 2
amazes me
years.
they spent infinite amount of time on this one project when we've got in the next 2 years, if you take away the grant funding, over $100 million that it's going to have to be paid for either out of our surplus money, which we have some, new bonds, or taxes.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money as long as we don't have some of these other variables. And Mike, you and I have talked about this. It just seems like, say, Fruitland Primary School, we don't really understand. In fact, I followed up today to get the number, and it's moved again, exactly how much the state needs the county to forward fund. I know that the council has had work sessions with the Board of Education, but quite honestly, none of us, Board of Education, the council, the executive, none of us know exactly how the state budget is going to affect the county's finances until it's finalized in mid-November, or mid-April, I'm sorry.
If you don't know what your revenue is going to be, regardless of what the source of that revenue is, whether it's coming from the state or coming from tax dollars, then how can you possibly plan? Everything is a variable. Everything is an assumption. And you know what they say about assuming. It's not what we want to do. One thing I think we can reasonably expect is that even as tight as money is right now, it's going to become tighter. Maryland is entering into a fiscal crisis, and it's here, and it's only going to get worse. So we can't predict how much money or the county will receive in grants, and we can't predict when we will get that money.
So when we come back, we're actually going to try to explain the yield rate calculations and just really how that could affect your property taxes for the county, the revenue cap, and really tie into the rest of the county's budget. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. In this segment, we're going to really talk about how the yield rate for the state would affect property taxes, would also affect the budget process and the capital improvement plan. In the studio with me is Dr. Joe Venosa. Thanks for sticking around.
Thank you.
Mr. Mike Goldberg, thank you.
Glad to be here as always.
So, Mike, we brought your house. I mean, it's a nice house. I like the landscaping. Looks wonderful. You got a sunflower over here.
The trimming is great.
Yeah, very great. So, Mike, I understand last year on this house that you own, you paid $1,000 in property taxes. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right, pay it up. Come on.
Man, this is
Now
really
look.
hard for me to get rid of.
For anyone out there who is looking to rob Mike later, this is actually just play money. So
Just
yeah.
like in the real world.
I'm still going to try to pass it off at Kentucky Fried Chicken.
So, so Bob Taylor gave us some analysis while he was in the studio earlier, and really talked about how the yield rate for the property assessment values in the county went up 6.6%. And we are lucky in this county that we have a revenue cap, which will keep that from growing no more than 2%. Because at 6.6%, I mean, Mike on his $1,000 you would be paying an additional, $66, right?
Don't ask me to do math. I was a banker. I can't do
Look,
arithmetic.
I'm the government. I'm taking the money right from it. But no, look, with the revenue cap, I mean, the cap is on average is $20, not the 66.
Kiss it goodbye.
So it's paid. Now, Joe, this money, this is the same money that they use to fund capital projects and also the operating budget. We're coming into the budget season, and unfortunately, we still do not have the analysis, the financial audit from 2024, which closed 8 months ago, right?
Yes.
I mean-
So let's clarify for the public. So imagine if you're trying to budget your own situation and you know nothing of what your expenses were for the last 8 months, and now you're looking for the next year.
Well, specifically, I mean, state law says 2 months ago this was supposed to be presented, and Mike, we've asked for this at the meetings, right?
We have, and it simply has not been done, and the county executive is in violation of law by having failed to submit this.
You know, we come from all political spectrums, the three of us. This is not a Republican or a Democrat thing. This is, this is just math. I mean, Mike, you're retired. You've worked your whole life, and you're now basically on a fixed income. I mean, you still have $46 in your pocket over there. I mean, are you hoping to hold on to that?
I'm hoping to, but something tells me it's going to be flying out of my hand.
Well, so Joe, you're a young husband, dad, and you got a kid who's in school.
He called me young.
Relatively
I love it.
young.
I'll take
How
it.
about that?
I'll take it.
But one of the things that's been underfunded in this county for many years is education.
Yes.
Which also happens to be the one area that the revenue cap can be busted to fund. Last year, the Board of Education asked for how much money?
They asked for $8 million.
In additional funds just to
Additional
catch up,
funds,
right?
Yeah. Which, from their point of view, is what they would call maintenance of effort, which is the minimum amount that you would have to fund the budget. So basically, they said in order for us to operate at a minimum level to achieve what we need for teachers, staff, student services, we would need $8 million. The county gave them $1
$1 million, and it was a one-time
It
payment.
was a one-time payment.
So this year, the understanding is they're going to ask for $9 million, right?
Yes.
And at the same time, we thought we funded our portion of the Fruitland Primary School. I mean, 6 months ago, if you had asked anybody in this county, we thought we were there.
We were told, right, that the funding was there, the project would be supported. We were told by our executive that because she supposedly has the ear of the governor, that basically that project was more or less guaranteed.
And now we the state's looking for us to forward fund it.
Correct.
Now, Mike, you and I were at the work session, at the Capital Improvement Plan work session, and we thought we were going to hear answers both from the county council and the executive representative, director of finance, how they planned on funding Fruitland Primary School with the forward funding, right?
That's what we expected to hear, but that's not what actually happened.
So, yeah, I mean, we got as we covered earlier, we got the 30 minutes of talking about elevator shafts in a building we're not going to occupy for 8 months. Where does this leave us? Where does this leave folks like you in the county as taxpayers?
Well, I'm deeply concerned about property taxes going up. Right now, we know that the county executive has a number of pet projects, many of which benefit her campaign donors. And in order to fulfill her campaign promises to the campaign donors, she's going to prioritize those. So we wind up loading up that left side of the equation, but that leaves insufficient funds to fully fund the schools as necessary to either achieve the maintenance of effort or give them anything extra. So how are we going to get the money that the schools are going to need if other imperatives have instead been funded? Well, this is where the county can bust the revenue cap.
And that would be a bad thing in my estimate.
We're all going to wind up paying for that.
But it's not like we don't want to fund the Fruitland Primary School, right?
Of course, we want to fund it because I think schools are an important priority. We don't have a future if we don't have educated young people. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the priorities are not the right priorities. I mean, just for instance, we have the expansion of the Civic Center, a bunch of aesthetic improvements to the exterior. Do we really need that? Can we live with the library as it is now, or do we have to move it elsewhere? These are just a couple of examples, but they cost one heck of a lot of money. So maybe some of those projects can be forestalled until we're on more stable financial ground.
But we can't even have that conversation if we don't even have the information on last year's budget, let alone enough sufficient time to discuss where we're going.
We don't know where we've been. We can't tell where we're going.
I think one thing our county council's proven is given a very small amount of time to make one right decision isn't necessarily their strength. The public deserves work sessions. They deserve public hearings. But also the county council does need the time to process that information, not making last-ditch efforts to make something right. But this isn't just about a tax increase. This also could be, because we have the revenue cap, this could be just a lack of the base rate going down as low as it could go. Because, one thing we can't help is the assessment value of our homes right now is on the rise. So it's not as if people's tax bill is necessarily going to go down, but maybe it's not going up by as much as it could because the revenue cap, it's designed to back the rate up so that the overall receipts of the county for property tax purposes only goes up 2% or less. No, the government taking less than what they get is not fathom. But we saw, our appointed delegate Barry Beecham talk at the county executive CIP hearing in October. You want to know who was excited about paying more in property taxes?
Good evening, Barry Beecham, county resident, and as far as I guess the elephant in the room here, everybody's talking about, we need funds, and the funds are lack thereof. I'd say the elephant in the room is the tax cap. And I'm just curious, how many people here would be willing to have their property taxes raised? To support these properties? To support any project, because and that's really what we need to really look at. And for me to say, hey, I'm in favor, of a tax increase, no one wants to hear that. But I'll be honest with you, from the state level. Yesterday, I was in a Zoom meeting, and basically we're about $1.2 billion in a deficit this year. Next year will be $2 billion in a deficit. And basically what is happening, everybody keeps kicking the can down the road, per se. The problem is that we don't have enough money to fund these. But what I really like to see, everyone in this room that I looked at raise their hand, and they don't mind property tax cap, being taken away.
Revenue cap.
Or revenue cap, I'm sorry. Yeah, so basically I would say that's where we're going to have to look, as much as no one wants to talk about it, and I certainly don't want to be the guy to raise my hand and say it, but really that's where we're at.
Some people actually raised their hand.
I didn't raise my hand.
Nor did I.
It struck me. Well, again, let's be open about it. I'm sort of from the side of the aisle. That's probably more people would be more inclined to be okay with getting rid of the revenue cap to some extent.
Okay.
So I was kind of surprised that an appointed, supposedly fiscally conservative delegate would almost want to be the cheerleader for raising tax rates for people.
You know, I'm a conservative Republican. You know, fiscally on social issues. You know, pretty much across the board. Some of the so-called Republicans that we presently have in power in our county, they claim to be Republicans, they claim to be conservative, are essentially advocating for increased spending and raising taxes. These are not conservative values, and yet they try to represent themselves as being conservatives.
I'd also argue that the priorities are not particularly, though, if they're not conservative, they're also not progressive or liberal, because what we're seeing,
They're just self-serving.
they're self-serving.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Well,
They're
so
self-serving.
I'm actually, I'm actually going to state that I don't think that our executive's office is of a conservative nature at all. And in fact, I think a lot of the political quote unquote wins are just masked as conservatism. But when it comes to spending, and this is the chance for the public to really see, hard decisions need to be made. So is your county council representative or your at large or them as a group, are they actually using your tax dollars in what makes the most sense, given the current financial situation of our state and maybe even our country? Not because we're going to sit here and debate federal tax policy,
or policy, yeah.
but how does it relate to the local folks, the people like Mike putting up his money on his cute house?
Here goes the rest of it.
So is now the time for people to get involved?
Now is
the time people pay attention?
Now is the time for people to get involved, whether that's physically attending council meetings, whether talking to their representatives, be they on the council or the Board of Ed. And frankly, if people are really, even more inclined, even though I doubt you'll get an answer, contact the county executive's office directly.
Well, you won't find her at a county council meeting, and you don't have a lot of open opportunities to...
You don't, but there is an email address and there's a phone number, and I would certainly encourage people to reach out if they do want to get a sense of these numbers. Because again, you said it's not, that it's a spending problem. That's true. But it's also a spending problem because we're spending in the dark. We don't know what's happened from the last year's audit, let alone what's coming up.
This is what happens to people when they never balance their checkbook. They don't know where they've been.
And
they can't foresee how much they're going to have to spend next year. It's a very simple problem.
And in the private sector, I guess there are people who do go bankrupt if they don't,
But that's not an option for our government.
It is. Oh.
Well, thanks for tuning in this week to the episode. Please pay attention to what's going on. Now is the time for your eyes and ears to be out on the street. We'll be back next week with another new episode. Give me that money.